stall a little bit before we open it to wider questions. We'll go 1, 2, 3 before we're having questions open to the floor. So Derek Gow from Derek Gow Consultancy, Ben Ross from Scottish Natural Heritage, and Euan Walker-Munro, who's a farmer with an interest in beavers. So if we kick off first with Ben from Scottish Natural Heritage to say your piece, Ben.
Okay, thank you. Is that on? Can you hear that? No? Yeah. Or can you hear me speaking? Anyway.
Would you want to use the mic?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm Ben Ross. I work for Scottish Natural Heritage and I'm the Beaver project manager. I've only been in this post. In fact, this post was really only created at the start of this year. Today has been fantastic to see and to see some real positives for once. A lot of my work is looking at and dealing with some of the negative aspects here, so it's really refreshing to see that. From an SNH perspective, I mean, we've been working, as we've heard from Sarah at the start there, SNH has been involved with beavers for the past 25 years. From the creation of the original Species Action Plan, public consultations through to NAPDA there, and then working with the Tayside Great Beaver Study Group, salmoniid working groups, and a huge range of people, farmers, foresters, landowners, conservation groups, to build up our knowledge, which culminated really in the production of Beavers in Scotland report. Again, Sarah touched on this, which was really to aid ministers in their decision as to what to do about beavers. And since then, we've worked with all of those parties, particularly through the Scottish Beaver Forum, to be able to take forward that work to come to the point from the 1st of May when protection was afforded, and then to look to the future as to what holds for beavers there. And all of this is about us as a Quango having to deliver Scottish Government's and the Minister's aspirations with regard to beavers, and they've been put up, Andy I think put that quote up from Rosanna Cunningham very clearly about allowing the existing populations to naturally expand. So that's the task that we've been given by government there. And as those populations expand, and we hope to see all of that good, great stuff that beavers will deliver, part of that was recognising that we also have to sometimes intervene. We touched on some of the management aspects as well there. And that's not a simple thing. In humans and beavers, we've got the two most proficient ecosystem engineers on the planet, and they've been apart in the UK for nearly half a millennia there. They've come back together, and what you get, and we've heard about this today, is you get change. And it's all about how we adapt and cope with that change, how we manage that change. And some people don't like change. Lots of us don't like change. So what does that mean in practice for us? What have we had to do? That's been about developing guidance, policy and advice about what legal protection means, interpreting the legal protection that we have, what needs a licence, what doesn't, how we'll regulate it, where and when, how we'll provide advice and action to people on the ground, how we'll develop, use, trial, monitor techniques to mitigate impacts of beavers there, and also how we will add resilience to various aspects of our landscapes to manage that change that I talk about. But also about how we monitor and what our research strategy is going to be, to look at how are we achieving that vision of expansion? Are we achieving it? Is our management appropriate there? Is it effective? How is it balancing the various interests that are at stake there? And how, as I say, how are populations responding to management? It's also about influence and shaping new schemes. We've heard a lot about this underlying factor about how we use our land, the ways in which we manage land, and how we can do that to reap the benefits that beavers will bring, but also to deliver all of the other things that land management should do. So it's about how we move forward in terms of influencing and shaping things like agro-environment schemes in the future, so that we can deliver these public goods. And finally, it's about promoting all of these good things that we've heard about there, and promoting the positive cases, and building that story for why beavers are good. And that's not simple, it's not black and white, it's very nuanced there, and it's not all rosy. So we have to think about exactly what we want. What are the balances that we want to achieve with all of these various interests? And where we can, how can we integrate those and get the best of all of those different worlds there? And we'll have to adapt as we learn there, and we are learning and have been for many years now. But crucial to that, and again I've heard this throughout the day, is about relationships and making sure that our relationships are right, that we can steer away from more polarised viewpoints there and bring everybody in who has a stake in this. And that's why the Scottish Beaver Forum, which has been running for a couple of years now, to me has been a model approach about bringing all of those people around the table, landowners, farmers, fisheries, local authorities, SEPA, other regulators, ourselves, conservation groups, in terms of all understanding, and actually none of us really disagreeing with that overall vision of what we want beavers to bring. It's all, the question is about where do we draw the lines, and where do we get the detail there. But that to me is the model approach. It is all about collaboration, and it is all about bringing people with us.
Thanks, Ben. Move on to Euan next.
Okay, quick mic check again.
Yep.
So, Euan Walker-Munro, farming and arable unit in Strathmore. I wasn't always farming. I was 8 years as a Marine, then went into aviation, spent 20 years on the North Sea in commercial aviation. So I thought that probably doesn't make my fossil fuel credentials very good, but there we are. We've always room for improvement. Initially, I was asked to describe what my views of reintroduction were. And I suppose in some ways it's simple. Well, there isn't really simple. There are two parts to this story. First is Knapdale, and of course, at the time, Simon Milne, another former Marine, was chief executive, so of course it was a well thought out plan, good terms of reference, well executed. As time's gone on, probably one or two bits about the project that not quite so sure of, but more or less it's done what it said on the tin. Then we have Tayside. And of course, rule number one of any reintroduction, by and large, is not to do it in somewhere where you have maximum animal to human conflict. And of course, Tayside is that place. And here we had it. Of course, it wasn't a reintroduction. So let me just run through a couple of the... I scrolled together lots of notes. Let me just put together some of the words that initially, if you sort of do one of these word search things online, you tap all the words, and the number of people that respond with a certain word, and that comes up as the biggest. So we've had experience now of these things for over 10 years, and unfortunately, the experience in Tayside has by and large been duplicity, deception, spin of statistics, political spinelessness. So the result of that, I'm afraid, by and large, is that in Strathmore, people feel hung out to dry. They're feeling that they're left to pick up the pieces and build for a situation that they didn't create. So, why do I think beavers are Scotland's natural ally? Because I think they have a role in bringing an end to public good at private expense. And what I mean by that is the way that I see wildlife policy having been implemented in Scotland. Okay, let me introduce you to let me introduce you to bubble world. The bubble world is a world where we go from our centrally heated homes to our car, to our centrally heated office, to a shop to buy food to go home. It's a bubble world. Fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with bubble world. Bubble world's great, most of us live in it. The difficulty comes where the same inhabitants of bubble world then make demands on policymakers, the consequences of which they don't understand. So let me take the seagull progress, which we are now, I was about to say, we're now making good, 10 years in. They've got a group of people who've been trying to communicate and no one's been listening for 10 years. Why has no one been listening? Because there are pup and sheep farmers on the islands. Fundamentally, we live in bubble world. You look at the newspaper, that's fine, I've got something else to deal with. Getting back to our beavers, in fact, there was a phrase we came up with, we chatted earlier. They are policy drivers. Beavers are now in an arable area. They're going to be in the fort. They're going to be in the central belt. Guess what? The more people they come into contact with, the more engagement you're going to get. The more engagement you get, the easier it's going to be to justify to the public and to the government the spending of money and resources, which to my mind is your best chance of ending up with a successful outcome. So they are policy drivers. You are forced, policymakers are forced to make a choice. You have a land use. If the ground is saturated, you can't grow crops. You have to make the choice. You can't just sit on the fence. Again, John was speaking very eloquently earlier about climate change. By and large, as people, we wring our hands and look the other way, hoping by and large that someone else will do it before we have to. Beavers force a choice. And that's why I think they're going to be Scotland's ally. In arriving, I think we could end up, or I hope we're going to end up, with the best wildlife framework on these islands, because they force a decision.
Okay, I don't need that. When I brought the first beavers in 1994 from Poland, from Popielno, the state farm that was established there to rebreed them for the fur trade, in Stalin's time there were no beavers here. That was a complicated thing in its own right, and at every stage on this journey there's just been simply more doors and more complications. There is no argument about it. Beavers are nature's water gardeners. They do everything that John Lister Kay said, and we need them everywhere. We need them everywhere now because the situation out there is grim. When we start to look at where we are, I'm one of the very few people who's been lucky enough to live more or less independently a lifetime and make a career in this field. Most people of my age generation now are doing other things or have moved from one nature conservation role to another nature conservation role. And what that means is that even though it may be a lovely journey and you get bits of experience, is that your knowledge base with regard to a single simple subject is peripheral and bitty. Every single thing we need to know about beavers has been written, studied and developed by people like Gerhard Schwab and Duncan Halley and Frank Rizal, many people worldwide, competently to the point where we have complete understanding of what they do. We know completely how to manage them. We understand their ecology well, even though it still throws up surprises. There is another word when we're talking about words that I'd like to use, and that word's hero. When we look at these animals on the tape and the other free living populations there are, does anybody here seriously think we would have got there with this animal to the point where we're having to have grown-up discussions about what we're going to do with them if we confined ourselves to the small, timid Knapdale trial alone? If that had finished in the way it finished 10 years ago, those animals would probably become extinct, and there'd be a big argument if the beavers were nowhere else about whether we should have brought more beavers in to reinforce it or let it dwindle out and die. We would have been the first incompetent nation in Western Europe to fail with a beaver reintroduction. The reasons why there are beavers elsewhere are because all the words that Euan mentioned were used to prevent rational debate moving forward with the restoration of this species. Duplicity, lies, backstabbing, deceit, political manipulation. They all came, and they're all still in play today. When I work with them, with colleagues like Rasheen and Alicia on projects throughout Britain, we encounter this time and time again. The door opens, you see positive movement, something good happens for a short period of time. And then the forces, frankly, of darkness gather round again and do things that are wicked. The Welsh have talked about reintroducing beavers since Jesus was a child and achieved nothing. Because at the end of the day, you have a group of small, committed, malevolent civil servants who want to see us move forward. Not at all. Natural England have been dragged into this, kicking and screaming, by whatever genital hair they have, to a point where they had commissioned reports to produce a nice wee plan with lots of lovely colours on it, on strategy nationally. But they haven't come there willingly as an organisation, they've come there because they've been forced to do so. SNH, for all their ambiguities, have tried. They tried to do something by the book. They tried very hard. They tried with very many people manipulating the situation against them. They have made some very bad decisions. The decisions to try to eliminate the beavers from the tea in the beginning was wrong. And the decision now, that 2 weeks before we declare this species a protected animal, that you're going to start issuing licences on the basis of virtually no evidence at all to many people who hate these creatures, on the basis of just because it keeps a small group of vocal people happy, is also wrong. When we talk about stakeholders in the room, I, you, we, us, all express the same views we always hear. There are very few children here. The little one over there can't even speak. But we don't ask people out in wider society what they say. And I can tell you time and time again, when it's come to the debates and the arguments about the ones on the otter, because it wasn't a case of we're going to go to the zoo. The first instruction that Defra got from Owen Patterson was we're all going to be killed on the back of a stupid letter that his mates from the Angling Society wrote to him, and they couldn't even draw a beaver if somebody gave them a box of Tesco cranes. But the minister agreed that they were all going to be killed, and as soon as you got to the stage where you had public meetings and you asked other people, the answer from those other people, very uncomfortably, and it comes back to Duncan's point on the politics of land use and what you can and can't do, was no, we want them to stay. And you know we need more of that. We need people out there getting very angry about what's happening, questioning how their money's being spent, because we have ladled wads of your cash, £474 a household, at farming systems that have literally reduced the land to dust and killed pretty much everything. And that needs to change. But it needs to be a relationship which is forged in fire, and it needs to be a relationship that if we're going to turn around and we're going to pay landowners again, is based on another word. And that word has to be respect, and it has to be very closely followed by understanding. And if you don't want the money, as somebody else said earlier on, that's fine. Don't have the money. Try and run your business in its own right without having this loot and watch it fail. I'm very, very excited about the white-tailed eagles and going out in the Isle of Wight. I wish I'd kept my 1,500 breeding ewes, which land at 170%, and even though we took very good care of them, we've still and landed in polytunnels, and we lost maybe 250 lambs. I'm really sorry those dead lambs are not there to feed the eagles. This idea that one lamb, an eagle carrying away his talons, is in any sense economically significant is completely ludicrous. The chief killers of sheep are parasites and protozoas. And that comes back down again to when we're going to have some sort of dialogue about this whole process that's meaningful. We need to sit down and get real sensible at this, walk away from the polarisations of the past, and look to a future that's brighter.
All three of you for setting out your stall in such a free and frank way. I think it's only fair for the three of you that you can actually start to discuss among each other as well. I've kept you silent and out of interaction there, but the purpose of this is for you to pitch questions to our three panellists here, so would anybody, lady in the front?
Was Derek saying that we need a new economic model for how to manage land? And if so, could you elaborate?
I don't think the mic was working.
We do, we're going to get
The
a new...
question was, sorry, that, was Derek saying that we need a new economic model for the way we manage land, and if so, how do we place it?
We're going to get a new economic model for how we manage land, and it's coming because of Brexit, and it's already clear, even though a good case, I think, could be made to say that we should spend more money on land and more money on changing a landscape that we've made to one which, as John has spoken about, is good for us, good for farming, good for nature as well. We're going to have less. The reality is there's going to be less. It may be that with changes upcoming in the Conservative Party, there may be some surprises there when the situation readjusts itself, and that more resources might be found for the environment both abroad and in Britain, but that remains to be seen. So it's coming anyway, and that money, I think everybody's perfectly clear, though I have to say that in the circles of power, the conversations are still all about how you up-tech agriculture and make it, and mechanise it more thoroughly, and that's the core of thinking. But that money essentially is going to be for people who decide to do good things and collaborate with carbon capture, water retention, water purification, biodiversity. And providing that scheme is implemented in a fashion that's honest and ambitious, it will be a good thing for the landscape.
Question in the middle.
How many of those licenses that you mentioned have been granted? And I'm also wondering, is there anywhere else in Europe that allows landowners willy-nilly, as far as you put it, to shoot beavers that are an irritation to them? Or is that just the UK?
Legal control beavers
Legal
carried out,
control, yeah.
it is carried out in many countries across Europe.
I'm just interested in by who? By ecologists? Or
I don't know
landowners?
if it happens in both. I think it happens both.
Both
landowners
landowners.
and ecologists.
Okay, so if you're talking about Duncan, you're talking about landowners in Norway. If you're talking about Bavaria, you're talking about a licensing system whereby people who are trained beaver managers are given a license, providing the situation in regard to specific beavers is credible to kill those animals if there are no other options. So when we talk about what's happening now, guys, you have to bear in mind, and this is no disrespect to Ben, who's only been in position for a relatively short period of time, and who I'm quite sure has not signed the death warrants, is that this situation has arisen not because there isn't a massive amount of beaver habitat available, but because you have a political dimension here which says no more translocations. Bavaria is approximately the same size as Scotland. There are 22,000 beavers there. That's good nature conservation status. And those 22,000 beavers stand a cull of 1,500 animals a year. We maybe here have 450 animals in Scotland. In Britain, maybe less than 1,000. And we're really going to kill these incredibly valuable creatures now? We should be paying these guys to catch them so we can move them to other projects, extend the population, make it secure, and then when it's secure, maybe beyond the lifetime of our children or their children, we start to look at the lethal control of beavers. But what we do not do and should not have done is hand the licensing system and those licenses on the basis of pretty peripheral evidence. I've seen some of them the other day, and one of them apparently was applied for on the basis that a beaver worried a cow. To people who really hate them.
I think we should give you the chance to come back on that.
That's it. Well, it's not really a case of come back, it's more sort of expand the point, really. Farmers do not want to be shooting beavers. It's expensive, takes time, hang on. Well, that's not my partnership. That comes back to Ben. Although Ben's probably going to be part of my answer in due course. The simple answer to my mind to this is follow the money. And the simple answer is there isn't any money. That's why the current licensing regime is in place, because it's costing you, the taxpayer, nothing. What should be happening, exactly as Derek said, is translocation. So from my point of view, the current licensing regime is temporary. In due course, I want you to put pressure on the government to come up with money to move the beavers from somewhere they shouldn't be, just as the Dutch have done. I think it was 100,000 hectares the Dutch cleared, which comes back to land use, which is why I think they're such a great animal. Hang on, that's fine. That's fine. You'll know more about it than me. That's fine. The point being, translocation would be much better. Again, the question comes back to who pays? Because if we didn't have this conversation before 2008, it would be completely different. I mean, I know, okay, there were budgetary pressures, but there was a lot more money sloshing around. Nobody wants to spend a bean today, which, to my mind, is why we have the current licensing regime.
But then the point of this is that when we look at this impact this animal has on water and purification, does anybody know here what the cost of cleaning up after the Cumbrian floods was? Okay, it's approximately 5.7 billion and rising. His budget for managing beavers in a state, in the state of Bavaria, is approximately €1 million a year. Okay, €1 million sounds a lot, but when you actually look at the benefits these animals bring, it's just a tiny, tiny drop in the ocean of the money that's spent and wasted on the clean-up after disasters like that happen, and also on the clean-up of polluted watercourses as a result of intensive agricultural land use surrounding them.
To return to your specific question, though, there's been 30 licences that have been granted that permit beaver control across Scotland. The law sets out, and we could argue about how shaky the evidence is, the cow thing, I don't know where you got that one from, but regardless of that, the law permits it. We can be challenged as to how we've done that, and rightly so, we should be, you know, we have to be held accountable there. So 30 licences have gone out. At the same time, we're hoping that translocation will be a tool as well. We are adhering to that ministerial vision about the spread of the existing populations, but that there is a lot of demand from down south and some demand from Knapdale for those animals, so we're working with those farmers as well to try and sort out translocation opportunities for when those projects come to light, and there's a number of those.
There's a few hands up.
Can I just, sorry, can I just quickly come back? Just to do with the whole management aspect, particularly in Strathmore, because again, we tend to be thinking of, or commenting about, beavers all over. There are different sections of land use throughout Scotland. So let me just read you a section right at the start of the Habitats Directive. Okay, I should point out that the reintroduction bit is paragraph 22 of 24. Okay, so it's a fairly small part of the directive, but right at the front, whereas the main aim of this directive being to promote the maintenance of biodiversity, taking account of economic, social, cultural, and regional requirements. Okay, let's redo that. Taking account of economic, Strathmore's a farming area. Social, Strathmore's a farming area. Cultural, Strathmore's a farming area. Regional requirements, Strathmore's a farming area. Which bit of the Habitat Directive do people not get that beavers shouldn't be there? So having established that, you then have to come up with some type of framework to manage it. Either it is cash, either it is a culling regime, or it's translocation.
But it's definitely not a culling regime, is it?
Well,
That
that's-
can't possibly even be on the table, surely.
Sorry?
That can't even possibly be an option.
Why not? It is according to the directive. It is.
But isn't,
Well, but the
but you
animals
say
aren't there.
that's wrong.
Say
Yes,
it.
it's wrong.
I'm saying it's not the ideal solution, but please get in touch with government to get them to come up with the money to remove them.
I will.
If you can do that, that'd be great.
Just to clarify, what the directive is saying there is that it gives that possibility to carry out beaver control. And again, we can argue about where you draw the line or the evidence base to be able to do that. What it also says, so it says what we want to do, what we have to do is promote and enhance biodiversity. we have to make sure that beaver populations expand, i.e. the Minister's vision. That's pretty much what the directive is saying there. It says that you can derogate from the strict protection of beavers by issuing licenses, including for lethal control, as long as you're not going to impact on the conservation status of that species. And actually that conservation status is a very large scale. So what we have to make sure is that when those licenses, and people, 30 is a lot, we have to make sure that the impacts of that, through monitoring that it will not affect that wider spread. And we have to remember that up until the 1st of May this year, it was legal to shoot beavers, and it was going on. It was going on unregulated. We don't know how many animals were being shot, and they were being shot probably in most of the areas where they occur. Shooting, these licenses are concentrated in quite strict geographic location on these areas of prime agricultural land there, which forms 12% of Scotland.
But it covers 60%.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't vary. It doesn't. I'm sorry. You're not far off, but it's less than 50 by my calculation.
Okay, so let's just say that.
But yes.
And that's, let's also be clear, 500 animals, 22,000. When also you're looking at small starter population, and when you start to slice off those animals in sections, you may also create something that's genetically unviable. And when we talk about Strathmore being a farming area, if we were sitting here in Devon, you could sit with somebody from Bodmin and say, Bodmin's a farming area, Dartmoor's a farming area. You know, the Colne, where we are, is a farming area. 70% of Britain is farm. When we look at this in a world sense, and let's look at it in a world sense, when we think of vertebrate life on this planet, 95% of vertebrate life on this planet now is us and our domestic animals. 5% of what's left is wildlife. This is not about having a rewilding exercise at Strathmore. This is about, growing up and learning to live with an animal that's perfectly tolerable in an environment with some degree of manipulation. Now, I agree with you, when you look at flood walls, and those flood walls are right next to the river, there is a problem with beavers. They dig big burrows and those flood walls could collapse. But that still comes back to the fact that we should not be killing these animals as a first step in this process. We should be taking very great care to move them elsewhere into alternative environments where they will do a lot of good. And that should be the first plank of where we are. Bad political decision, that's what we should be aiming for next.
I think we're going to need to move on to another question soon, but just, Ben, you were keen to say something. Or you want to,
The lady there has a hand up.
Well, I'll just point out, this is not about all.
Yeah.
This is not about all farming either. I'm talking about these areas that we call prime agricultural land that have certain characteristics, those flood defences and those drainage ditches in them, which are particularly susceptible and particularly difficult to mitigate against. Certainly in the shorter term, there are definitely options in the longer term for how we can do things about trying to make some of these areas more resilient.
And I think
It's probably enough to move on.
Yeah. Just to finish that very quickly, one of the other photographs which perhaps you didn't quite realise the significance of when Gerhard showed it, was there was an aerial photograph of prime agricultural land in the area with part of it, and part of this had been bought to allow the beavers to live in the middle of it, and essentially to allow their activities, the dam building, silt capture, the detoxification of the water supplies to function as a kidney in that landscape. And that is truly progressive thinking, but to do that, we need to own that land.
Exactly. Well, I was about to say, but there you come back to the phrase that I used. I used public goods at private expense. You're now moving into public goods at public expense. Bingo. That's what we're after. If you want this stuff, pay for it. So, I know there's one of the sort of observations about, well, we're a democracy, so what most people want is what you're going to get. Well, if you take it to its extreme, if you're in the Colosseum, the crowd want the Christians to get eaten by the lions. Okay, one of the characteristics of a parliamentary democracy is minorities have rights. So therefore, by and large, you're going to get better engagement if you give something in return, rather than imposing what you want at their cost. So, public good at public expense.
Yeah, but this is where it all gets a wee bit queasy, because I farm too, and I've had, okay, not your money, actually you're English, some of your money, I've had £25,000 of your money a year for the last 10 years for doing bugger all, okay? That's the single farm payment. I can take it and do anything I like with it. I don't have to have a hedge a foot and a half high, I don't have to dig a pond, I don't have to have a headland, I just get it for being a farmer, okay? That's it. So we have had an awful lot of their route for doing nothing for a very long time. And
Well,
really,
well,
because at the end of it all, if we now want them to give us more money, we're going to have to think a wee bit. We're going to have to think quite clearly.
we're not thinking about more money, we're thinking about
Less
what
money.
do you, no, think about how do you want to spend your money? And I get back to my point about the beavers force the decision. Actually, do you know what? You go, if you want beavers, and great, fantastic, pay for them. If you want food, great, pay for them. But again, just bear in mind, one of the other aspects of bubble world is magic food. So for every, now, one of the nice things about being in Scotland is porridge and oats, okay? So let me, I know you want to move on to another question. In simple terms, every acre, 28,000 portions of oats. So every acre that you rewild, I'll do the calculation later, I did it for NEP actually, 84 million. It doesn't matter. That magic food has to come from somewhere else.
Yeah, but we're feeding that magic food to cannibal, to the fandom.
Not in Scotland. Now you move on to a bigger question about climate change. And we're quite happy to deal with that if you want.
Actually,
You
we're probably
want to
doing
Probably
yeah.
no.
It's too much fun.
It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You've only haven't got started yet.
It's great because in fact the audience for animating the discussion so much of the participants for doing the same so far, so it's all very, very important. But there's a lady there that
Don't not ask your question.
I know.
You're waiting for ages.
But you don't worry that they're going to
No, much of the answer, but it was really to do with we're in a proper climate catastrophe. We've lost so much of our biodiversity on this planet, and really, what are we going to do next then? There's a lot of discussion here. What would your answer be? What are we supposed to do?
We're going to do what he does, and we're going to get big groups of beavers, and we're going to run up and down the river systems, and we're not even going to bother sexing them. We're going to look out the car window and say it's fine and let them go. We're not going to spend 2.2 million to learn that a beaver on a pond doesn't build dams, eats trees, and has sex and produces baby beavers. It's quite pointless. We are not good in Britain at doing things like this on a big scale. We're good at producing endless reports which then sit in shelves, and then at some point in time we take them off, dust them down and rewrite them again. We need to change our modus operandi.
Well, I was going to say, is this mic working or not? No, I don't think so. When I was saying about beavers being a catalyst, soil's already been mentioned. Soil is a catalyst for farming to do something. Now, one of the interesting aspects about that, of course, and ultimately we don't know the answer to this, are you prepared to pay more for food from Britain?
Yes.
Yes. Well, here's an interesting one. This is where I'm now going to talk about the dog shit factor. What I mean by dog shit factor, sorry about that, of course I'm wrong. This is the difference between what people say and what they do in reality. Everybody picks up all their dog shit, don't they? Of course they do. Where do all these plastic bags come from then? So, again, I just caution us about what everyone said they're going to do and what happens in reality. So, I mean, just as a simple thing, it really irritates me, and I'm sorry for those of you that like really iron shirts, but to my mind, ironing things is a complete waste of energy. It is a little cosmetic thing that people do, absolutely no requirement for it at all. Lots of people still do it. So I think as JLK started off, everybody needs to make small steps to begin with. But ultimately, as a human population, we have to realise that somewhere along the line, we do need land to produce food. Now let me introduce you to another concept, graduated biodiversity. So the question is biodiversity good? Yes, but. So let's take an extreme. An operating theatre, probably not. Okay? A hotel kitchen, probably not. Okay? When you're saying about paying more for your food, some of the crops I produce, the buyers expect 98% germination rate. So they don't want biodiversity. So we have to accept there are some areas where we go for maximum biodiversity, other areas for less. Now, a slight complicated with beavers is they promote wetland biodiversity. So that is quite specific, which is why I'm a little bit worried about Derek's idea about having beavers throughout areas like Strathmore. Not quite so sure about that.
If we can't tolerate beavers, how on earth can we expect poorer people in other parts of the world to tolerate elephants?
Good question. There's a different point there.
But if children in the face is utterly grim.
There's
Utterly grim. Anytime I work with
there's land going out of production. Land, I mean, Ben's been on one side, land's going out of production because the banks are now porous. Now some of that, again, comes back to Britain. God bless our Victorian ancestors with engineered waterways. Actually, they're a pain in the arse. The fact is they're there. The trouble is now, when the water levels go up, quite often the banks are porous. So the water is going into the field, so you're unable to produce food.
But what we're also looking at is landscape, and I don't really want to go back to farming, but when you look at the intensity of landscape and the spill off into the water courses, all the pesticides and contaminants, then you're looking at another bill that we have to pick up for that as factors.
Well,
it's not straightforward.
That's not necessarily to do with beavers. I was about to say, the thing with that...
It's changing landscapes.
You're
getting corridors through those landscapes that 10, 20 metres wide as buffer strips, and nothing the beavers are doing.
You're behind the times, it's already happening.
Okay.
But you're already one stage on. I was about to say, the key to this is soil health and soil condition. In a way, by the time the water's got into the watercourse and the beavers are doing its stuff, you're one stage too far in. So, I mean, yes, farmers got to do all those things, but beavers in themselves aren't what I call a solution.
But soil health is, again, also something that comes back into the fact that we've had this system of mechanised farming since approximately the Second World War. We've no idea of where it was going to go and what it was going to lead us to. We now know. So this idea that you take the cattle away, and the sheep, or the cattle in particular away, the livestock away from a landscape, and you just have a seed base that you pour chemicals onto and healthy crops grow, we now know to be ridiculous. And look at the price, look at the price of life, and the financial cost of it.
I think we need to take another question from over here.
I just want to come back to this question of private money for public good. Is that your phrase, Euan?
It was public good at private expense.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think that, firstly, that one of the questions that concerns conservationists is public harm done for private interest. And I think that that's something that, you know, we all know some farmers who could be accused of doing that. Losing soil, polluting waterways, you know, destroying hedges which were full of
well, that comes under geek. That's actually the law of the land. So
yeah, but I mean, but I think that the thing is that the other thing is that we're farmers too, and we do get public funding, just as most farmers do. And we've always considered that public funding is given to us in order that we should do public good. So we don't do it at private expense, we do it at public expense.
Well, I'm talking about beaver damage here specifically. So,
well,
so here I am picking up the bills for beaver damage, and they're doing nothing for my farm. Are you suggesting there could be public funding for hosting beavers?
Well, I think that would be excellent, and I'm not against it.
Okay.
But I also just want to make this point that, I mean, obviously everybody's land is different, and so the impact of a beaver on one piece of land is different from on another. But in a broad sense, for a farmer to work out a way to tolerate the beaver, which might mean moving back from the water's edge, farming a little bit less land, or installing some mitigation, would seem, in order that their runoff gets filtered before it reaches the waterways, could be seen as a good use of the public money that we farmers get anyway.
But,
that
isn't beaver damage. So removing dams, so parts of the bank on the island that is disappearing into the river, that isn't really covered by that. But I was going to say just about farming in general. And part of getting back to my phrase is to how farmers feel engaged. By and large, a lot of the description that Derek gave of farming, we have done because you, the public, through the government, asked for cheap food. We have done exactly what you asked for.
A lot of us, I mean, that's...
Well, hang on. But we're talking about over the last 70 years here. So again, let's just, I mean, I'll ask for sympathy here. Let's quickly look at the industry. So the price of a bushel of wheat in Chicago Future Exchange today is more or less $5.
Yeah. I mean, it's a
What was the price? What was the price in June 1960? Correct. So, and in that time, so the price hasn't moved. Within the time that we came to Connections over the last 40 years, we've seen a 90% loss of men off the land. I say men, because predominantly it was men that was working in those days. Okay, so forget the clearances of 200 years ago. This is the industry that's happening now. And guess what? You turn up and go, and by the way, what you toast an animal that might damage your land and cost you extra expense. And you really expect people to go, oh great, thanks very much.
One other point about bags disappearing into the river. I mean, there are quite a lot of parts of Strathmore, I know, where having sheep are going to stop the water's edge. Do you have a problem with that?
That is illegal, currently.
Well, it does.
It's currently illegal.
Came across that road from the ferry yesterday, and she came across the road and flock sheep standing with the bank collapsing beside them. And we were in...
so we'll see, but that's a key, good agricultural market.
As you know, so well goes on and nobody will be able to stop very much.
Well, that's not our issue. That's the issue.
It is our issue as farmers. I mean, I live in a farming community as well. They're nice people, but the guys upstream from me, have slurry slippages, on a regular basis, and that goes all in must be.
Of course it does.
So, at the end of it all, nobody's going to walk that. And in the time I've been here, 20 years, nobody from the Environment Agency has ever walked that stream.
Well, they should have. Well, actually, they are.
But it is our problem as well, and until we take ownership of these issues as farmers and landowners, they are going to crucify us.
Derek, we are taking the issue. We're paying the bills. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. And it doesn't take, if you want to get engaged,
people are paying us, and we don't survive.
Well, they're not. Well, now you move into a different thing. What are the payments for? Are the payments to produce food, or are the payments to look after the environment? Discuss. Now, you can have one of them. You can have that.
But the payments are doing nothing.
No.
Yes, it is. A single farm payment is a historic payment based on the land.
But hang on, Derek. That is how it has been orchestrated to make it administratively simple.
No.
Yes, hang on, Derek. Hang on. What has actually happened is the supply chain has soaked up that money. So this is where, when you can take the choice, guess what? You're absolutely right. But if you're actively farming that land,
well, we're not.
Well, you're not. But exactly what I was going to say.
Anyway, Beavers.
Move on from that, Andrew.
It's really just to follow up. It was a question for both Ben and Euan. Euan, at the beginning, you said that farmers don't want to shoot beavers. Now, if that's true, and subsequent discussions suggested that one way of stopping that happening would be for the agricultural subsidy system to change to incentivise farmers to tolerate beavers. But with the current political regime, the minister has said that, translocation is not an option, so you've got to shoot them if you've got a problem. How do we get to that point where the two ministers involved, who are not in this room, should...
Three.
Well, okay.
It's Mara Newton as well. Who's wrong?
She's Rosanna's sidekick.
She's a minister.
Yeah, but we need two ministers to knock their heads together and sort out how environmental goods, public goods can be incentivised so that you, the farmers, are not having to shoot beavers. Now, one question for you is, how much are your representatives in NFUS lobbying the minister to actually bring about those incentives? Because if you're not, the words we've heard from you today are hollow. But the other question is for Ben. How can we bring that from SNH's perspective into the next public subsidy regime as it applies to farming when whatever happens post-Brexit happens?
Well, I was going to say, if you look at steps to change, the NFUS document about the future of agriculture, and I should say there is still currently no equivalent way ahead document from the government, so we just don't know. That is partly in it. It doesn't specifically mention beavers, but it mentions a strategy for environmental payments. The direct answer to your question, though, to do with now, actually is they're more concerned about the livestock industry, because 70% of them are exported to France. So the answer is, today, I bet you they're not talking about beavers at all, actually.
I talked about the fact that we can influence and shape agri-environment schemes, but a lot of that is also about pulling together, I think, the existing information. Derek says it's all out there, it's all being said, but there is still more going on. Exeter University are doing a lot of work to try and gather this information and make that sell, I guess, about these positives that beavers can bring, and to be able to put that to government and feed into the development of those schemes as to what those public benefits will be as a result.
But I mean, we heard from Mark right at the beginning that one pair of beavers were attenuating stream flow, markedly after 10 weeks. How much more information do we need before governments and civil servants waken up to the benefits that these creatures can bring immediately?
Well, to go back to some of the words that Euan used earlier on, there's another trial in Forest of Dean. Now, there have been a few hiccups with that one because of some political issues. But the whole point behind that trial was to create a sustainable system in a valley whereby the beavers with their impoundments held 6,000 cube of water in 1.5 kilometres and prevented the village of Lidbrook from suffering a once in 30-year flood event every 10 years. And the response of the National Farmers Union in England has been to issue a statement to say that they are now working with the Environment Agency to ensure that beavers cannot be seen as a sustainable deliverer of flood prevention solutions. So when it comes to dialogue, one of the big problems with dialogue is, and that's dialogue in a nature conservation sense, is that we're too insular, we need more openness. When it comes to these issues about countryside use and change, it's really hard to establish a debate and a relationship where the organisation you're trying to establish a debate and a relationship only ever says no.
Well, I was going to say, just as quick, by and large, I suspect they'll initially say no, because they don't see anything in it for them, which comes back to the communication bit. But to do with, I'm a little bit, trouble's the wrong word. I think there's again, a lot of it comes back to work and funding. To do with flood attenuation and what that can and can't do, more particularly where it's being done. And I was looking briefly at the website for Chris's farm and JLK's place compared to where I am. Because there's something that just doesn't quite sit right in my mind about the flood attenuation descriptions for where they are and where I am. And the other gradient.
Yeah.
Gradient. So if you put a foot down where I am, the effect that that's going to have is going to be completely different to AGAS. And we just don't really know enough yet about, well, I don't see what it's going to do for me. So let me just give an outline description. Beaver dams holding back water in upland areas. Well, no, holding back water in my area. Well, once the dam is full, what more water can it hold back?
We've got more dams.
Well, exactly, that's
right. So what you've got in a flat plain is the biggest flood attenuation.
The soil.
Attenuation.
But again, I return to that point about you're already talking about it once it's in the watercourse. Now, getting back to the thing we mentioned earlier about soil, somebody in the room will probably know, but I can't tell you offhand, what the percentage figure is for water retention in soil per percentage of organic matter. It is astounding. So your best water retention place is the soil. Now, if your soil is already saturated, you can't hold any more water. So I'll return to the point of, so again, quite a small dam in mine can saturate a large area of water. So I still got a bit of a think spot about some of this, actually.
No, it's actually very simple. In wet woodland environments, what you have is
woodland environments.
But it would also,
not in my environment.
I mean, in fairness, you're trying to farm it, and I quite understand that, and it's prime agricultural land. But even in an environment like yours, what would happen is if you basically hold the water back for long enough, wetland vegetation would basically reinstate itself.
Yep.
You would then have mosses reinstating themselves, the beavers would dig many canals, create many other dams, and therefore your water holding capacity is simply vast.
But we come back to land use. That land which has been saturated as growing all those wonderful things isn't growing food. So
And then there are plenty of other parts of the landscape where we keep things called sheep, which we don't want to eat.
I'm not talking
In
about
any
sheep, I'm
case.
talking about Strathmore.
Yeah, but we look at the 4 million acres of written around the sheep, and you know, with this
That doesn't come under the land, that doesn't come under the lethal
actually-
control bit that Ben's talking about.
well, maybe it should be if we're looking at sort of like, well, I mean, at the end of it
Shouldn't
all,
do, is the
well, we
point.
look at those sheep.
Oh, sorry.
But the point is, it's a very broad church, and there are different cases for different kinds of food.
Absolutely.
And there are some kinds of food that's really, really good.
Yeah, I just think it is about that point about where that maximum value of that land is, and then where the maximum benefit you can get from beavers. And I think that is largely outside of prime agricultural land. It is.
It's whether at the end of the day you look upon them as being, one, a mechanism for creating buffer strips between watercourses which should not be farmed nearly to the edge, and whether you then also look at implanting the kidneys in those landscapes to sustainably clean water. After that, obviously you need to keep prime agricultural land. But the point of where we are with this killing debate is that there's plenty more habitat elsewhere, and we should not be killing those animals now.
I think we may need to move on. I'm aware of the time also moving on, and people with different transport requirements and things. But take probably a final question from there.
Thank you. I've worked with farmers in farming and conservation, and I think we can get the voice what we need. Just point it towards your mouth more. All right, okay. We obviously need money, and money is a short resource just now. Farmers and quite a lot of other businesses get tax relief, and they go off and they buy a tractor at the end of the year. You know, not them all because they can't always afford it. But if we were to change the tax system a little bit, we could do it. The Scottish Government possibly could do it overnight, and allow farmers to spend the money on environmental improvements or work for beavers or whatever. Do you think that would make a difference if we could just change the tax? Because we don't, if we're short of money anyway, if we change the tax system, instead of buying a new land or maybe not, whatever, would it be an option to do environmental work instead?
I suppose it could be done, but ultimately there will be a cost to the exchequer somewhere along the way, which again is why I come back to us, you. I mean, I don't want to say us and you, I mean us.
How's there a cost to the exchequer when I'm
Because if I'm getting tax relief for doing environmental benefit.
But I go out and buy my piece of machinery that I don't necessarily need, I could repair it. You go to a lot of farms that are over mechanised.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know,
Yeah.
I could actually spend it on something else.
Well, you're
It's
assuming
only one
that.
solution, but is
Yeah,
that possible?
it comes back to land use. And again, like a lot of these things, if it's well thought through, rather than being a knee-jerk short-term reaction, then yeah, let's examine it. You know, there could be something in it. Like all of these things, the devil's always in the detail.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
again, if you're looking at all possible options, yeah, why not look at that? I mean, machinery and compaction is a big issue to do with soil health. And it's a little bit like the sort of drone issue, whereby, okay, I've probably gone off a bit of a tangent here. So, you sometimes read in the press at the moment that we're not going to need tractors anymore because drones are going to do it all. Well, that was a little bit like the description sort of the late 60s, late 50s, early 60s, where theoretically we weren't going to have cars anymore. We could all have our helicopter. We're going to fly from home to work. So theoretically, that's possible. Practically, it's a non-starter. Some of that, I think, is in the current discussion around machinery and robotic machinery, because big machinery, compaction, and soil health is an issue. So the current trend is, oh, we're going to have lots of robots. Yeah, I'd put that slightly under the sort of drone helicopter bit. Some of it will come by, but not all of it. That probably doesn't answer your question exactly.
No, I'm just saying, spend the money on the environment.
Well, again, that comes back to what land choices you want to make.
Spend the money on translate beavers from one place to the next rather than spend
But
it
for
on.
those of you who are not farmers, I think the point you're actually trying to make is that if you're a farmer, is that you try to basically get to the end of the financial year, your accountant comes out and says, you're actually going to make a profit. Bugger, you're going to get taxed next year. Quick, buy a tractor. That's what you're saying, yes.
And
And for people who think that's ludicrous, guys, that's actually the way it works. Honest. So
and you could spend it on something a little bit more worthwhile, because you possibly don't. It's just better ways, we need to think of better ways to spend our money.
I think we'll probably have to move just one very quick question then, and we'll draw it to a close.
We have tax relief 2 or 3 years. We have tax relief every year, not a lot, but we usually spend it to farm infrastructure to keep up with environmental regulations, like SAPA regulations. So we spend our tax relief on to comply with slurry regulations, which protects the environment. It's rarely that we'll go out and buy a tractor because we've got an ego problem. It's usually because there's a need.
it is, there'll be a very interesting social study in that. So my son, for example, is a wee farming boy. He goes to school, other wee farming boys, and they all like to have their dad, they want their dads to have the biggest, flashiest tractors. So there is actually tremendous peer pressure coming up from, would you believe it, very small children, to ensure we actually give you our tractors as often as we can.
I think on that thought, we're going to need to draw this part of the proceedings to a close. And mind you, of course, at least in the past, Canada used to have the beaver as its, one strong aspect of its currency. I don't know if they've moved on. That's for different reasons, including I was trying to exterminate beavers in Canada for pelts early on, but it's an interesting combination with the two coming together there. I hope you'll agree that we've had definitely a very free exchange of ideas here, some differences of opinion both from the audience to some of the speakers and within the speakers, as it should be, and I think actually it reflects some of the liveliness of this debate, which is a blooming good thing. So as we're moving forward, I hope that you feel that this is being part of the continuing dialogue and that we have generated at least a few chinks of light in what you've heard just in the last half hour or so here. So I think first off, if we could thank our 3 panelists.